You've found the Quill and Kettle, a gathering place for misfit authors and other creatives reclaiming the magic in their craft and the courage in their business. I'm Allison Martin, and this is Our Circle, a space for honest stories, creative courage, and a bit of alchemy. Each episode is part coffee date, part creative ritual, guided by intuition, tarot, and the conversations that help us find our way back to ourselves and our work. So brew something warm, settle in, and welcome to the Quill and Kettle, where intuition meets industry. Before we dive into full episodes and interviews, I wanted to slow down and share how this project came to life, what it means to make art from intuition, from chaos, and from the spaces between. This season is kind of a prelude, a gathering of the threads that wove this podcast into being. It's less about answers and more about reflection, about the courage to create and the balance between thinking and feeling, dreaming and doing. Today I'm joined by one of my dearest friends, Alida, a cinematographer, actor, and pyrography artist who has been one of my loudest cheerleaders through all of this. She's not a writer, but she understands story in a way that's visceral, embodied, and deeply human. Together we're talking about going inward, finding the still points between hyperfocus and overwhelm, between thought and emotion, between the dreamer and the judge. Our tarot spread for this conversation is centered on the Two of Swords, flanked by the Page of Cups and Page of Swords, the heart and the head, with the Seven of Cups reminding us to return to reality and the Knight of Cups leading us forward with gentleness and love. So refill your tea and take a breath and join us as we navigate the space between inspiration and action, the liminal territory where all art begins. Before we get started with it, I wanted to just ask you a quick question about your own creativity and like what is either like lighting you up creatively right now or completely destroying all of your creative energy at the moment.
Right. Because I'm probably more in the destroying all at the moment. Well, not totally. It's a good question. I mean, we're building the house and things are stressful. So, and I have too many businesses going on for sure. So that definitely is a result of creativity and then also a destroyer of creativity.
Fair, the idea of like starting something and that like, you know, the great creative fire of being like, yeah, a new idea and a new thing, but then realizing that you have to actually follow through with it and complete the project and do all the tedious, horrible details.
Totally. I think it's bad because I'm super action orientated too. So they've all started and they're all going. And now I'm like, oh, this is a lot at once. And then you're into the keeping them all going or distilling what actually matters and what actually is bringing the results or what's actually like bringing any gratification. And then, cutting it down. I think I'm in this big phase of cutting it down. Meanwhile, I have ideas, like I have a mural idea right now that I'd love to work on this winter. But it can all catch up with your body for sure when you move all of the balls into motion at once.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and so I drew a 5-card spread before we met. I did this last night and was thinking on things. And that seemed to be like a theme in the spread as well. The like pulling the 7 of Cups and the idea of you've got all the things and you're like, I could do this and I could do this and I could do this and I could do this. But then like, at what point do you have to get started on the doing of the thing or like setting aside, choosing which idea is the best idea, which idea you should go with and that kind of thing. So I thought that would be a really interesting thing to talk about, especially because you and I, we accomplish a lot of things in hyperfocus.
Try to rely on the hyperfocus, but you can't control the hyperfocus.
Yeah.
What
do you think is kind of that alluring aspect of all the ideas and all of the like that belief in hyperfocus? Because I know for myself, and it could be different for you, but for myself, I get into this delusional state where I feel like I can physically accomplish all of the things that I want to and all these ideas that are coming in. And there's always a moment in time where I realize like, shit, no, I can't. So like, how does that kind of manifest for you?
Right. You know, where the burnout happens at the end, but it's like, I have the same illusion because like both of us know that when a hyperfocus kicks in, we can get a huge amount done in a short amount of time, whatever we've procrastinated up till that point. But then I've also like historically tried to, because I know that I need a certain amount of variety. So I've tried to craft it so that I just my illusion is, then I'll be able to hyperfocus switch, right? So I'll do this. And then during the break from that, I'll just kick into this hyperfocus over here, which would be enough of a change, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't actually work that way. Because I think you said to me once that you need not the space out time, but the time just to like daydream, have no fixed thing that you're doing, have no goal. Because then, what I've learned is that like if I'm just switching hyperfocuses on all the tasks, then there is no actual creative space as much. You're not going to get to control when the hyperfocus kicks in. And then everything becomes work, nothing becomes creativity, because there's no just like space out daydream time. You need the time to just float in the clouds a bit.
Yeah.
Have no fixed thing to do, like whatever doodling, whatever journaling, stuff that's not like something that I have to do. Yeah, I really see that kicking in when I've lined up a bunch of hyperfocus things.
Projects. Yeah. Like building it into your schedule, right? Like actually planning an hour or something in the day where you can literally just sit and stare at the wall if that's what you feel like doing or you need to do to kind of like do that downtime. I know, like one of the other cards that was pulled in this spread too is the Page of Cups, which is, and reversed as well, which, is that idea of like living in this rich inner landscape and like the daydreaming, and it ties in perfectly with the Seven of Cups and that idea, that fantasy of being able to like do all of the things. So I know, like for myself in my own writing process, I struggle to get the story out of my head and onto paper because I spend a lot of time being like, it's perfect. Inside my head, it's perfect. Like the characters are perfect. The story is perfect. Everything is just aligned. And so the moment you have to like take it out of that dream world or that idea space and put it down onto paper, that's like a whole nother kind of switching of the brain, right? Into and just like letting it go, letting it be what it's going to be in the real world and not just like in my imagination anyway. So like in your own creative process through your pyrography and stuff like that, like what is the space there? Like how do you dream up your pieces, because they're quite fantastical, right, and then get them out onto the wood? And especially in your, like, I can delete my document, start over again. But like for you, pyrography in your art form, like it's very, I know you can sand it and like restart and stuff like that, but it's a process. So like what do you have any of that? I guess what I'm asking is, do you have any of that kind of like keep it in your head, procrastinate, putting it out there because of the work involved?
And this is where I learned, and again, this is something you brought up a couple years ago, but I really learned with you and the other member of our Quiet Coven, is that both of you're really deep thinkers. Like you both build these really intense internal worlds, and you both love to deep dive, right? Like I've learned very detailed things about circuses from you and things like that. So I have a few that you're both really big. You build really intricate internal worlds, and letting that out of that safe space of the internal world is a tricky part. I think for both of you. And then for me, it doesn't manifest until I start physically doing it. So like I don't know what they are until like I'll start burning, and then it'll show up. And it was the same like that in the acting world. Whereas like I wouldn't remember a line that I had until I was on stage, and that was terrifying in New York, off Broadway. Going to go on stage, and I was like, I was like a lead quite often, and I couldn't remember a line before I was there physically doing it. So I think in the acting world and the dance world, it taught me a lot to let that go. But it's different. It's not a huge. I mean, in the acting world, I've spent a lot of time building the character, and then once I trust it, it'll go. And the teachers beat that out of us, right? Like that we really had to just trust and let it go. And in pyrography, it's the same. Like I have a piece idea, and then I'll start burning it, and the wood kind of decides what it's going to be, and then something else will pop up, and I'll be like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. I did not expect that. But I think when you're building the really big, creative, magical worlds like you are with the Legends of Lyron, for example, or these multi-dimensional, it's a different story when you're one of the deep thinkers like that. And now having two friends that are like that, I'm realizing I'm not like... Like I just need to physically do it, and it'll.
But that's also why we work well together too, because I'm like, oh, I've been thinking about this story forever, and you're like, write it down,
do the thing, do
the writing. But there is a lot. I do have a lot of that in my writing process as well. That idea of like, I I think about these worlds and I create them very elaborately in my head. But then when I do start writing them down, there are lots of moments where like a character, I mean, even you mentioned the Legends of Lyra and Daryl, right? Like the twins that popped up in that story, they were never there.
Mm-hmm.
They were never there. Just like she like hijacked a train car and then they just poof showed up. And now they're like super central characters to how the plot is going to unfold. Yeah, so there is a bit of that, like, just, feel your way through it and see what happens, which is very much the emotional side of creating art, right? Like sitting with it and going back to the spread, there's the central card, which is the Two of Swords. And like, to me, that it really well, not only is she in the very center, but she's also flanked on both sides, on both edges by pages. So Page of Cups and Page of Swords, which is very much like the feeling versus thinking. So that like inner world and that dreaming things up and like thinking that, because your art is the greatest thing. This is the greatest thing that's ever been created, which is a thing that I believe every artist should feel at some point in the process. Like, because why would you make something if you thought it was garbage? Like, if you didn't, if you weren't inspired by it and didn't love it and didn't think it was great, at some point you have to be like kind of emotionally attached to it. But then, like on the other end of the spectrum, there's the Page of Swords, which is very much like the thinking, the rational. But the Page of Swords can manifest as being quite judgmental, quite rigid, quite attached to like, this is the way that it should be, and not being able. So that tension between the thinking and the feeling functions, and like, how long do you dream about it? How long do you think it up? And then when do you start moving? And like, that's why I thought this spread too was really interesting with the two of us, because like, I'm a feeler and a dreamer and you're like a let's go. Like I'm very much kind of solitary and sort of over here in my emo feels, and you're like, let's get a group together and like all work on this project until it's done, kind of thing. And so
and I think that's been a bit of a survival thing for me too, because I do have problems with the last 10% of anything. Like with pieces, with the wood pieces, like I'll hate them at 90%. And I'll be like, I'll leave it for 3 months until I go finish the last flower or something. But I learned with a lot of creative projects, if I attach myself to someone who's like, if we collaborate with somebody that's different, or operates different, then they do bring in the like, okay, the more deeper thinking side of things, or the we need to center that, or whereas I'm like, okay, let's ship it. Like, what's gonna happen? But I think that comes a lot for both of us from being in the wilderness so much here too, because there is a lot of adapting, and we know we're gonna go on the trail, and then there's gonna be a bear, and then there's snow, and then there's rain, and then and we're just like, our lives are dictated so much by the wild here, by what the weather's doing, and so like that feeds into, like you said, the twins just showed up, right? After you've hiked and backpacked and done the things enough, you learn to trust and go with those things, and I think there's a piece in there that helps us. Yeah, but sorry, back to like what you said with, I do kind of grab a group together, even being an introvert, because I know that I will take action before things are ready. And then learn from whatever goes wrong. So it's really good to attach to folks that are overthinking and won't ship it, but will make it right. So that I can help move it into like, okay, let's see what happens, put it out there. And then they will be like, okay, wherever they're struggling with wanting it to be absolutely perfect before it goes out. And that's, I think, the acting world in New York, you just have to trust so much when you go on stage, and you have no control. And usually, like, if you think if it's gone really well, probably didn't. And if you walk off and you're just like, that was all right. And like you said, like you go through, like you love your piece or your book or your performance, and then you hate it. And then you're like, there's a part at the end where you've just kind of, it's
accepted it.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily a part of you anymore.
Yeah.
It's not even about you anymore.
Yeah, people talk about books, like writing books, as a process of like parenting, right? Like that your book is almost like your child, in the sense of well, first of all, you made it, right? You created it, and then you want to protect it, right? You like love it so much, and it's just this little baby idea, and you're just working on it, and you're like helping it grow and all of these things. And then all of a sudden you have to let it out into the world, and in the parenting world, right? Like sending your child out into the world to have other people decide, like pass judgment on them or decide whether they like them or not, or be mean, right? And so there's this sense of overprotecting your art because you're still quite attached to it. Like when I was in art school, that was one thing that they worked a lot with us on, was the idea of like almost divorcing yourself from the project at some point. Like you have to love it and think it's the coolest thing ever created. And then you get to a point like where you absolutely hate it. And this is when authors come to me and ask my advice about whether they're ready to publish. My answer is always like, not until you hate your project. Like until you have hated your project and until you have looked at your book and been like, this is the dumbest thing that's ever been written. And then you work through that in the editing process. And then you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I did my best. This is, it's not, like you don't have to think that it's just fine. I do think that as an artist, you should support your work, right? And similar to like if you were to send a child out they don't turn 18 and move out of the house and then you just stop caring about them, right? Like you still are supporting it and you're still encouraging and you're still like trying, your best to make sure you're there for them. And it's the same with like books and putting art out into the world when people are like, you still have to advocate for it, I guess. But until you can do that without completely folding in on yourself emotionally, if someone says a bad thing or like, and it with acting too, like back to the collaboration and that being something that you have really taught me through our creative work together, is that I used to do all of this on my own. I was very much it's my idea, it's my story. I'm a designer by trade, so I did all my own design work. I did, other than hiring an editor, I basically was like, nope, it's me. And now, like after working with you in different various ways and being like, oh, well, this person's really good at that. Let's pull them in and let's do that. And then that was like a moment where it was very much like a Page of Swords moment for me, right?
Yeah.
Where I was like, yeah, like I think I've been believing that I'm the only one that can do justice to this project. And that's not true at all. I bring other people on to help me with my work. And now like I'm having a cover designer redesign of Dust and Flame, and I got sent the concept and I was like, this is better than I could have ever done. Like I could design it, but I'm so attached to the story.
Right. Yeah.
That I can't see it for what it really is and for what readers need to see it as. And so like trusting people that you collaborate with and that idea of walking out onto stage and having to like, and knowing that, the people you're on stage with will help you, will cue you, will, will spark your memory to remember your lines and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that was a huge lesson that I had to learn anyways.
Right. Yeah. It's there's like 20 thoughts that popped in my head there as it goes. But I think like it's funny because a little bit of the Yukon mentality is the self-sufficiency. And if you look at and there's more and more literature out there now that self-sufficiency isn't actually possible, but community sufficiency is, and that we can't be the island, so to speak. But I'm thinking too that it's kind of almost, or do you think it's kind of a muscle you build in terms of like you've published a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure the first one was like you wanted to protect it quite a bit, right?
That's actually quite interesting because in the publishing world, there's this thing that a lot of writers call the rookie bubble. That's what I call it anyways, where I wrote my first book in a complete state of absolute delusion.
Yeah.
Right? Which is like exactly where I needed to be. I thought it was the greatest thing that had ever been created. This was back in the day. This was like in 2012, an absolute height of the new self-publishing wave where everyone was like, we could publish anything. And Facebook was still not being a jerk about like, if people followed you, they saw what you posted. And so I built this, like, I just started like posting things on Facebook and was like, this is the story I'm writing. And here's a little snippet of what I wrote, and just completely delusional to how like the actual publishing world works. And I just went for it. And then I published it, and it like I had built this hype with my community. And looking back on it now, I kind of like kick myself because that book did really, really well. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like no idea at all how well it was doing. And I was just like, I published it and went about my day. I went to work, I went to the laundromat, I picked up my dry cleaning, and thought my mom and my best friend would buy it and that would be it. And then I like go and check online and there's like thousands of downloads. And so it was just this moment where I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Still had no idea, like was hitting Amazon charts and all this kind of stuff. Not a clue. And then the like criticism started rolling in and the bad reviews and, because I didn't have that book edited. It was like me and everyone else who was writing in 2012. We were just like, yay. And yeah, so like that is often the thing that bursts the bubble. Like there's a thing in writing, it's the sophomore book, right? So your debut book is often written in this sense of like, especially if you self-publish, this sort of delusional bubble of like just fun. You're just creating it and it's fun and you're writing and you're doing whatever you want. But then you put it out there and then you start getting that pressure from the outside world and that feedback from the outside world. And it crushes a lot of creatives. It crushes a lot of authors because now you're writing your second book and you have all these voices. This sounds like fan fiction. This sounds like it's been written by AI. This sounds like, like there's all of these things that come like, I mean, I've had reviews where people have told me to like off myself, because they didn't like the way that I wrote, so there's and that isn't huge. It's part of the process for sure. There's always trolls on the internet, but it's really, really hard to let that go and to not get, like emotionally sucked into that and sort of let it crush your spirit. And it kind of like, this is kind of interesting because this feels very much like the page battle here, right? Like between emotions and thoughts and that idea of overthinking your work.
Right. And it kind of almost, there's like that period where it falls from grace a little bit and then you get it back. And I guess it was like that in the acting world for sure. Because at first you're like, you make it into these schools or whatever, your first bubble is you have some talent or something like that, you think, because you got, I don't know, an agent or different auditions or different roles. And then you start to have your art ripped apart. But then you learn to play the instrument, so to speak. So you go back to learning the keys almost. Yeah, and then you get to bring the spontaneity and everything back in once you've built up enough of that resilience in between.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this, you have the first creative bubble, you have the fall from grace. I'm doing a bunch of hand movements. And then if you make it through that part, then you get to bring the first part back in. That's what it sounds like. Because it was similar in the acting world. Anytime it's open for criticism. But then also when you start to realize that like, if you have the right people, you're allowing the information from the right people in, like, so from only people you trust are giving you the feedback, then it becomes a little bit addicting too, because you're finding deeper parts of yourself. So first you're in love with it, then you're not in love with anything, you think you suck at everything and everybody's ripping you apart. And then it's like, if you have mentors and people you trust, they're pulling something deeper almost at like that soul level, right?
Yeah.
But also you learn what it is by some of the feedback. Like you had the one editor, the first edit for The Legends of Lyron, talk about taking it more in a romance direction and less in the feminist. And I raged about that as a reader. I was just like, no, this is what it was. It was just because I was just talking about it that day where I was like, finally, it's a book that, it actually shows women at a strong point, not being rescued by men, but not in like an purely angry feminist way or anything like that. Just in the like, actually in our power, able to handle things and that collective.
Yeah, it's a book about sisterhood.
It is, yeah. It's the covenant and sisterhood. It's like the real sisterhood. Yeah. And right away, mass media being like, you need to turn this into a romance, but the guy saves the day. I was like, fuck that. But then you learn, so when you get the feedback too, that's like totally against where you think you should go with something, then you really learn what you believe in with it too. But then sometimes, you have those mentors that they pull something a little bit deeper from the soul of things and make things better. Like even when I was working on that mural, it was like 104 hours, and I sent you a picture because I had detached from it by that point. I said, there's something where I need the shading, where's the light hitting, and then you had feedback about the shading and that still stuff. I was like, sweet, and that added more to it.
Right.
But But I think once those muscles are developed for accepting feedback from people you respect.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that really ties into why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place, right? Like basically everything you just said is like boiled my entire goal for this whole thing, because it's like at some point you have to start believing in yourself and trusting yourself. And so when those when that first feedback comes in, like in your rookie bubble where you think you're the greatest, most creative thing that's ever lived, that's great. That's awesome. You need that kind of like that level of delusion. I mean, I wish I could attach it. Like, I wish I could find ways to like grab hold of little bits of that still. But then you have the fall from grace and that like realizing that other people will interact with your art and that they will see it through their own lens, that they can only see it through their own lens and their own life experiences, and they will pass judgment on it, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise. And then at that point, there's like this sort of, I know that I went through this, and I've talked to lots of creatives who have this like kind of battle of overthinking, emotional attachment, not know, like just losing themselves in this effort to try and shield themselves from the outside world and the feedback that might come in, like, oh, I'm going to write this trope because that's what everyone wants to read, or I'm going to like water this character down because she's too powerful and people are going to tell me that she's unlikable, and that kind of stuff. And so we just sort of like flatten our art in order to try to appease strangers, basically. A whole bunch of opinions that it's like super overwhelming. You can't make everybody happy. And I think everyone knows that. It's a cliche phrase, but like once you start to like even the first season of this podcast is called the Creative Reclamation, right? And it's reclaiming your own power and your own voice and your creativity. Like people are going to judge you no matter what you do, so you might as well do what you want to do, right?
And if you're getting any reaction, if you're getting strong reaction, you're doing art, right?
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of people hate it. You've triggered something subconsciously, and it's going great,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going great necessarily, but it's if there's no opinion.
Yeah.
At all, then we probably weren't brave enough.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I guess art is supposed to say something no matter what form of art you're doing. And so anytime you say something, some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. And that's what makes it art. And that's what starts like as an author, your job is to make some people feel something. And if that feeling is like absolute rage and hatred for your entire existence, then like that sucks. But I mean, you did your job, technically. But there are also ways, like with that said, it's not to say that you have to, this comes back to the like Two of Swords energy too, like holding those two things at once, like that you can feel how you want to feel about it, but that real art, like the fact that she's blindfolded and that her arms are crossed over her heart and she's got her two swords held very surely, right? And so it's this idea of going inside and figuring out what it is. Like having people say horrible things about you or your art is painful, and that pain can live in the same space as knowing and understanding and thinking that you are doing what you need to be doing in the way you need to be doing it, and creating that like to continue moving forward, and sort of that space of acceptance comes from more within than it does from without.
And developing those tools, right? So she's got the two swords, and our teachers in New York used to say this too, like you develop the tools and then you have the spontaneity. So she's blindfolded, but she's got the tools, right? So there's like the element of the trust and the element of like, I am able to use the tools to do what I need to do or defend myself. Or
exactly. And like the fact that it's night and she's sitting in front of the water, like water is very commonly associated with like depth, soul depth, intuition, like that internal landscape, the moon with intuition, the cycles, the seasons, like knowing and trusting that these things happen in cycles and seasons, and that you can weather these storms and sit, on the calm shore, but also be totally ready if shit gets real,
Yeah.
And so I just think that that's a really interesting interesting thing for that to kind of be the front and center.
Building that, you build the tools and you let it go. You build up the resilience, you build up your toolkit, and then you drop the reins.
Yeah. And the idea of like the Two of Swords being the center and then flanked by the two pages, which, are kind of the most immature expressions of their suit. And not in the sense of like, oh, you're immature, like you're a baby, but they're just like underdeveloped, right? Like, so the page of cups is much more like getting lost in that emotional space, like really losing yourself in that emotion and not being able to like rationalize or to pull yourself out of it, mood swings, like that kind of stuff. And then the page of swords is much more the thinking rational function, where in the immature expression of that suit, it's very much like judgment, right? Well, they don't get it. Just, like if you get a bad review on a book or something like that, well, they just didn't get it, or they just, this is the way it has to be. And and so having that kind of like on the outside, and then there's two other sort of what I call bridge cards. So there's these two cards that bridge the two pages into that calm, centered, eternal state of the Two of Swords, which is the Seven of Cups and then the Knight of Cups. And so that like dreamer, imaginative state, and that the idea of the Seven of Cups with like it's basically a card of discernment. It can very much be about fantasy and living in those like if that page energy is kind of left unchecked, then it's this idea of living in this rich internal world where you're like, I'm a famous author, or I'm a, like a Hollywood star, or I'm doing, and you can live in that space in your head without ever having to like step foot into the real world. But the Seven of Cups being the bridge to the Two of Cups is kind of like, which of those illusions do you have to let go of? With like on the card, there's the dragon, and dragons are very much, well, it's kind of like a dragon lizard thing, but it's like protecting those, right? It's protecting those cups, and it's like shiny treasure. But like, what can a dragon do with shiny treasure? Nothing, just other than hold on to it. And so it's this idea of letting go of those illusions and choosing the things that are like leaning more into that swords energy, where you're thinking about things more rationally. And then the Knight of Cups bridges that page, and the Knight of Cups is it's the knight of like love, right? It's the knight in shining armor kind of thing, where he's on his way to find his true love and has his cup of emotions and is ready to give them freely. And so this idea of bridging that harsh, judgmental page of swords energy into this more kind of state, right? Into this more accepting and less judgmental state, whether that is judgment of self or judgment of others. Like, there's lots of different...
accepting the judgment of others or assuming the judgment of others, when it's not always. Yeah, and it makes me think too, when you say like the fantasy versus reality, the emotions versus the thinking, and how you said about the being in the imaginary state of being this famous author and stuff. It's also like grounding into the reality of what success actually means for you as an artist. Because a lot of us actually, if we got to the really famous author role, we would be miserable.
Oh yeah, I would.
If we were right at the top of the 1% there, and there's actually a ton of success and a ton of triumph at the other levels, right, at the other layers, and what do we actually want in it? What would actually nourish us versus what we think we should be, or we're not making it in less. Like we're always not making it in less. Like I remember the first year I was in the acting world, I got offers from like 3 of the biggest agents in Canada, and I was in some commercials, and I was like Heartland and some other bigger shows, and I thought I was doing horrible, and I made like $15,000 in the first year. I had no concept of what success would even mean. There's only one success in that realm.
Right.
And I had actually no desire to be the ingenue in some big film, but in art too, like we haven't made it unless we're selling pieces for $10,000 a piece and we're fully making our money off of our art. But that's not necessarily true to us, and not actually.
Well, yeah, no, I would absolutely, I would hate it so much if I was like a household name. That's never been. But yeah, like what you were saying, your definition of success is almost put on you by other people, by media, or by social media or whatever. This is what it means to be successful. You have to be rich or famous or whatever. But there are so many different levels of success. Like for me personally, one of my largest measures of success is my time. How much time do I have to just sit and stare at a wall and think about my book before I have to write it? Like, that was one of the reasons why I ended up going back to work after I had my daughter and was going to try to make a go of it writing full time. It just absolutely crushed my creativity because my financial success was now dependent on my creative success. And for me, those are two things that I just didn't like having linked at that particular time. And so, like, I ended up going back to work, and now I work, and that's what pays my bills. And so I can take the time because I do spend a lot of time thinking about things before I ever like write them down. And so most of my books, like The Legends of Learndale, I've been working on it for 11 years now. Like, most of my books, once I get the idea, I actually have to think about the book for at least a year or two before I will even start outlining it or writing it down, because it's a lot of like, I am, Page of Cups 100%. I am in my world and in my feels about these stories, and I have to basically like role play in my head every possible scenario that the story could take, and then I like pick what I want, and that's just part of my creative process. And to have to write and publish 3 or 4 books a year, or something like that, which is the common advice in the writing world, is like, the more you publish and the more you publish in the same genre, and I mean, it's true, obviously, if you publish books in the same genre regularly, you will build that awareness up about yourself. And so like, that was a 2 of Swords moment for me, for sure, where I had to like choose between the two, right? Do I want to be a household name, or like be recognized in a specific genre and make enough money to support my writing? Or do I want to allow myself the creative play that I crave and I need for my process? And so that was, those were the thing that I weighed, and I, I've never really looked back. I feel like that was the right choice for me.
Right.
They might see that as a failure, and I like, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this whole podcast in the first place was to talk about these things. And is it really a failure, or is it just my process and my path?
And I think if you're finding the right balance with that, like I remember our teachers and I've heard writing instructors say the same thing, that like you're studying and depicting in the human experience. Well, even our instructors used to say, work with people, go work with people, because if you really want to understand people, if you want to be able to write about people, you want to be able to portray people, you need to understand people. So like that's why a lot of writers go to cafes, so you can be around, or airports are great.
Yeah.
But around, because the characters will pop up, right? Or you'll understand different depths and stuff about them. As long even if you're fully making money off of your writing, I think still staying rooted into the world, so to speak, actually helps you affect the world more, because you're going to understand it more. So I don't know if it's like, there's so many stories of billionaires going to be delivery men or stuff like that. It doesn't like be in there. So it's like, what does success actually mean? And now more than ever, it's super subjective. There's no one path at all. There's people making way more money on the unconventional paths than the conventional paths,
Yeah.
Like, it used to be like, if you told someone you're an actor, if you told someone you were a writer, they're like, oh, have I seen your book at Indigo? Or like, oh, what TV show series have I seen you in, right? Like, I have a friend that she's a really good actor, and she was for years in the conventional space, and then she created her own super niche TV show on Patreon that's just like reacting to and discussing very specific kinds of movies. And she makes over $15,000 a month in that. And it's there's a lot of acting and stuff within what they're doing.
Right.
But it's super niche. It's like a big passion of hers. And that's where, so she's making more than most of the folks that were trying to go the conventional route in that sense. So you just really don't know where, assuming that we're only successful if we're in, I don't know, the next big movie, or if we're a household name, like you said.
Or hitting some sort of list, right? I mean,
yeah, the lists are everywhere now. It doesn't matter. You're going to get on one.
Yeah. I mean, I gave up that long time ago. That's one of the delusions of writing, right? Is that, and like most industries and most careers, it's like who you know, right? And everybody,
100%.
Everybody has different connections, and everybody has different like lifestyles, even like, again, another one of the reasons that I'm really interested in starting a podcast is because I love to talk to other creatives, but we live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, I just got high-speed internet like less than a year ago. And so like,
we got it a week ago and it's still crashing all the time.
exactly.
Yeah.
And like flying anywhere, I don't live in the central areas. I can't just pop over to a writing conference and, do book signings or meet with a bunch of cool authors and creatives. I can't do those things. There are lots of really cool people who live here in the Yukon that I connect with, and lots of creative people, but it's from so many different industries and so many different areas, which I mean, it's a conversation for another day, but I feel like that was a huge help in my process, is getting that outside influence from other creative people. It's not just writing, right? Like, I'm chatting with quilters and crocheters and artists and
platinum musicians.
Musicians and people flying pianos to mountaintops, like these kinds of things. And so it's like that's beneficial. But like for me, for networking, for being able to connect in those ways, I had to get creative. And the podcast is the best way to do it because I can talk to people from all over the world. And now I can finally do it because I have high-speed internet. So, so here we are.
We're moving up there.
But to somebody who, like, the point of all of that is that I could look at another author who is doing, like, quote unquote, really well, whatever definition of that, you put on it. But maybe they live in a big city and they have a personal writing group and they go to events and stuff that I can't go to, right? Like, so there are easier ways for people to make those connections and more plentiful ways people can make those connections. And if you can't, if you're a small town gal like us who lives in the middle of nowhere, then there are certain realities that come with that. Right. And like, I have made peace with that and actually prefer it, because I think about the idea of like moving to Vancouver, even just to be, I'm like, wow, no, thank you. Right. Like, I would rather not.
I think that the wilderness we have here really informs our art a lot too. So then we can kind of pass that on to folks in a different sense. But yeah, that was one of the, when I moved, that was one of the main reasons I left the acting world, because you had to be in the city. And the year that I left, my agent was letting me send in taped auditions from the cabin, which was hilarious. Like, I remember doing this one audition for like a police officer role in one of the TV shows that was happening in Vancouver. And I was like, I had to use like the downstairs basement of my parents' place because it had a white wall. And I had to fly down whenever I got something. And then I got 2 lead roles, one indie and one both indie, but kind of pretty good directors. And I quit. I didn't want to be in this. I was dying in the city. I just needed the wilderness. And I was like, I should be happy, but this isn't what I want in this sense. I love storytelling. I think stories can heal people. And I think there's like huge healing in the wilderness. And one of the best ways to transfer that to people is through stories, and it's through bringing them into things where the characters are deep in that wilderness. And I think to understand that wilderness, it's good to spend some time in it. Right? Like, you are with your stories are going to have a little bit of a different edge in terms of the forest and what it feels like, or the glaciers and what they feel like, or the cold and what it feels like, or the
that is one of the most common bits of feedback I get, is how like setting and environment plays a huge role.
Like, they're their own character.
Yeah.
Because they are where we are, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you have to hike up mountains and be like, why did you bring me?
Yeah. When
everyone's like, why don't we go swimming in that lake? We're like, this is freezing. Why would we do that?
Yeah. Meme of like, why do I live somewhere where the air hurts my face?
Yeah.
It's very much. But I could like describe in detail what the pain it feels like of that air on my face.
But then we're also in such a relationship with it, though. Like, here, because all of us introverts are relieved that the hibernation season is coming.
Yes.
The snow is almost here, even though there's so much work to do outside. And that's actually a bad thing. But like, that means things get quieter, like, because of living in the land of extremes. Like, the summer is full on and then the winter is quiet. And we get the, like, just like you said about cycles and stuff, like, there's cycles with your creativity, there's cycles with your writing, there's cycles with all the thinking sides that have to go into things. Like, we're not always on, nature's not always on. And here we're like really reminded of that, and we're almost forced into it just by a vitamin D deficiency level. But you were saying too, with like the feeling and the thinking and stuff like that. And it's so interesting because like I was listening to a thing about how, you know, there's always no matter what level of creative work you're doing, there is always the like logistical, I think shit sandwich was what the one woman had said. Like there is the admin, you know, there is the not fun stuff of like centering whatever, or me, it's a lot of it trying to figure out editing, which you help with a lot, thankfully. But there is the stuff that's just like the grind. No matter what, no matter how great of a piece you're creating or a project you're creating, there's the grind always. And that's just kind of part of it. And I think when we like let that be part of it and let that be a break sometimes, that could be good.
Yeah, and even with creativity, right? Like creativity isn't always comfortable, and it's not supposed to be like creating things, you know, whether it's creating art or, you know, like even with the idea of childbirth, like it's an uncomfortable process. But you know, beauty comes from it, and that's like an extreme kind of version of keeping with the whole, you know, being a birthing your story or birthing your art idea.
There's going to be a part where it sucks, and that's okay.
Yeah, but it's like worth it in the end, right? It'll all come together.
Yeah, or you might not like it till it's been out for like 10 years, you know, you come back to it and be like, oh, that was all right. I remember you saying once someone's like opening the door, you throw your piece in there and then you shut the door, you know.
Run,
run, exactly.
I published a book, bye.
Yeah, I don't want to know what happens to it after.
Yeah.
It's very true. It's hard to get to that point where you're like, it's not about us. It was really interesting, the acting world, because they're, they rip you apart. Like, oh, you're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're doing whatever.
Yeah, it's your face.
You're too big. Yeah, it's your face. Your profile shot's not good. It's so many things. And then you have to go up and pull a character through you. Yeah. Remember, it's not about you. But to get there, you know, make sure your makeup's on that day. I don't know. Depends. Or wear too much makeup or not enough makeup or all the things.
Yeah.
It's quite... But then it's actually really not about you, like the catharsis you're creating with any character, with any art piece. People are just going to take it a total sideways way, and that's great. It's doing its job. But that might have not been even close to what intended it for. Like, they're going to take your character Ro in a million different directions. They're going to interpret her totally different. Us getting to be the alpha readers interpret it totally different. Like, yeah, that character, that one bugs me for some reason. But usually that means it's bringing up something for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, honestly, they're not, especially in writing, like all of the characters that I create, they're not meant to be liked universally, right? Like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like that character. Good, neither do I. And she's been living in my head for 10 years.
She's finally out of there. You're dealing with her now.
Exactly. She's your problem now. Thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so if you had, like, given all everything that we talked about as well, like what would you say to people if they came up to you and were like, I would like your opinion on how I could live more into my creativity?
Geez. I think one thing you and I have talked about a lot is like trust that whatever speed and process and way that it shows up, like way that your process shows up for you is right for you. Like, trust that what resonates with you and what doesn't feel good is okay. If it doesn't feel good, and to lean into what brings you alive. But also remember that there's going to be the period where it falls from grace, where it's not as sparkly anymore. I remember the pyrography, like, first thing I drew was like a dandelion fluff, and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I made a dandelion fluff. And the guys still have it because nobody bought it. They bought everything. And then I got in, as soon as if it's starting to be difficult, if it's starting to have more negative feedback or internal, if you're pushing against something in yourself, that means you are expanding, right? Like, so when I did the mural Raven, I was past thinking the dandelion fluff was great, but I was past thinking even the Raven was great. But I really wanted to do the Raven, you know, and it was in movement. I still like had a relationship with it, and I had a love for it and stuff like that. But I was just like feather. Oh, that kind of work. And then I was like, it's so great. And then I left it a couple weeks and was like, it's not great anymore. I need some feedback on like where can we polish the edges of it and then let it go. So I think understanding that, like, once we build the tool belt, the spontaneity from the beginning gets to come back in. Yeah, we have the spontaneity and we have the freedom, and then we have the fall from grace, and then we build the tools. And while we're building the tools, it can feel like we're losing the creativity, that we're not doing it why we love to do it. And that might be the place we most abandon it. But if we get to that point, then the spontaneity and the magic gets to come back in, but you have the swords like here, and you can put on the blindfold and you can let go because you have the tools. And that's when the metal really hits the meat for something having endurance.
Yeah, and the idea of like, I love that, as well as bringing the, the 7 and the Knight back into it too. That idea of building the tool belt, but knowing which tools to pick up and which to leave. Like that idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable, but also not doing things just because people tell you should do. Like there's a difference between feeling uncomfortable and being like, this isn't for me. And learning that discernment is really comes with practice, right? And it comes from living in that fall from grace. And it seems like you're in a really dark place, but it's not. You're building. Like you're building those things, and when you can like flip back in, then you're making art that feels good for you, but also has that like professional polished quality.
Yeah.
Because you have the skills as well as the confidence to kind of...
And you've honed your voice by defending it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say, because there's 2 different things you brought up in the last couple of years, was like you talked about beers and doers, and I think attaching yourself to the opposite, or having a friend that's the opposite, or like working a little bit collaboratively with some folks that are the doer or the beer. Beer thinker doer, was it?
Beers and doers. It was a thing I got from a money coach, Jessica Ely, that I worked with. And that's what she talked about. People who have to believe they can do something before they do it, and people who do something and then believe they can do it because they have the proof, right? And there's the 2 different kind of ways. And I'm a beer, for sure.
And that was a big aha moment for me when you talked about that, because I was like, oh, okay. And also you talked about like people that are intrinsically motivated, extrinsically motivated. Like I will never let somebody else down. So I always attach an accountability to something that I know is going to be the long haul to somebody else, because I will bleed on the stake before, you know? And then having the like attaching to the beers and the doers type thing, like amongst our little groups, we have some good mix of that. Because you need the beers too. Yeah. Because sometimes there should be wings on the plane before you jump off the cliff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Big time you need the ones that can craft, like, this is where this is going to go. I'm going to catch it before it crashes. And I think trusting, like choosing the people that you really trust in that space, but being brave enough to like open your babies a little bit to and you do that with alpha readers and with, and you do that with illustrators, and you do that with now even letting somebody else cover design. That's pretty huge, actually. Yeah. I think that not being afraid to open that up.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing, and that a lot of that comes from like bringing in the teamwork. Is it just what is that? Teamwork makes the dream work or whatever. Or cheesy ass thing. Yeah. But also it allows me more time to focus on what I really want to do, which is write stories. And so getting to live more fully into that creativity and letting go of control of some of those outside or fringe tasks, right, is definitely where I am at this particular moment in my journey, right? But it's taken 12 years to get here.
Yeah.
So, like it's okay that things take time.
Yes. I think that's one of the biggest things with how you coach people is leaning into that. Each person has their own unique path, so to speak. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
No worries. There's a lot of upside down cards here.
Yes, there is.
What does that mean?
I think the way that I interpret it, because there's so many of them that are upside down, is that it's indicating not necessarily like bad things, but internal things. Okay. So it's the flipping it in rather than that's the way I've kind of felt about it.
That makes sense.
Because it doesn't feel like a spread that's like, this is garbage, everything's garbage. No. We suck.
Yeah, I know. We love that narrative sometimes.
It definitely feels more, not the negative aspect of the card, but the like, this is something to watch for, right? So the over-emotionality of the Page of Swords or the over-judgmentalness of the page, like just watch out for that, right? Like try to see if you're living into it. And some of them, like the 7 of Cups is reversed, but that's actually the more positive expression of the card. The upright 7 of Cups is that idea of getting lost in the illusion of all of these dreams. Whereas the 7 of Cups reversed is more about discernment, is more about understanding that you can't do all of the things and that you have to choose, like that these 4 cups are being guarded by the dragon, but these 3 are free. Don't worry about what you can't have and what you can't make work, and just take what you do have and what you can make work and go with that for now, right?
I love it.
And then the Knight of Cups is the only one that's upright in this whole spread, and that's just the lover.
Toward love, gentle approach.
That, which is kind of funny for the two of us who would rather impale ourselves in our own swords than be rescued by a knight in shining armor. But here we are, learning
that. Do not ask for your help. No.
It's okay to accept help.
Yes.
And love and appreciation from other people.
Right.
We'll get it figured.
We're getting there.
We're working on it.
We got the collective, so it's...
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Before you go, if you've been resonating with Quill and Kettle and want to help bring this project fully to life, I'd love your support on Kickstarter. This campaign is how I'm funding Season 1, and backers get access to behind-the-scenes content, creative extras, and a few Secret Society-style rewards I've brewed up just for this launch. You can find the link in the show notes or by searching Quill and Kettle on Kickstarter. Every pledge, share, or word of encouragement helps me keep the kettle on and the conversation flowing. Legal disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Quill and Kettle are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the show. The tarot readings and discussions featured in this podcast are intended for reflection and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as financial, medical, business, or mental health advice. Always consult a qualified professional for guidance specific to your situation.